Knowing Captain Andy, I'm still expecting a condescending response video, telling me that I'm dumb and that I completely missed the point. Should be interesting.
Well, you know what they say about a stopped clock. Hello, ladies, MBs and gentlemen. So, bearing. For those who aren't familiar, bearing is yet another one of those channels. One that serves primarily as a flak machine, operated from a position of anonymity, often nay entirely pumping out antagonistic response videos, largely for the entertainment of an audience whose most vocal members are right-wing, anti-academic, opposed to social justice, thoroughly lacking in any intellectual curiosity, constantly appealing to popularity, needlessly and unproductively obnoxious, threatening, have very little of any substance to say, but are fiercely insistent that they be listened to, think being blocked is somehow a violation of their right to free speech, etc, 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 etc. It's not always that easy to tell how much of what these channels spew forth is actually genuinely what they believe, and how much is just done to stir the pot. But nonetheless, these people talk quite exclusively out of their arses, and that which comes out of someone's arse should be put promptly in the toilet and flushed, not paraded around as though it's some groundbreaking work of literature. These channels are essentially that kid, i.e. the annoying little shit whose only source of fulfillment is running around the playground upsetting all the other kids, and of course the more upset they get, the more it spurs them on. This sort of behaviour is frowned upon when children do it, but when you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and this is still how you get your kicks, it's not merely frowned upon, but rather concerning. Inevitably, Bearing has decided to make a video directed at me. Yay. Unsurprisingly, this has brought with it an influx of comments from the great unwashed, such as, these ones threatening me with violence, or these ones announcing my content has been or should be flagged down. This coming from a bunch of Freeze Peach warriors, no less. Or this tragic specimen who openly announces he's here to harass me. There's also this delightful fellow who in no uncertain terms has announced his ambition to brutally exterminate all Marxists. I'm sure Bearing, being the hugely principled individual that he is, will be absolutely disgusted at this behaviour and will be announcing his disgust post-haste. Definitely. Totally going to happen. No chance of a double standard whatsoever. There's also the people who obviously didn't watch the video save for the small portions Bearing fed to them, given as they seem to think I'm a liberal, even though I specifically stated in the video that I was an anarchist. And the clips Bearing chose to use were actually me as an anarchist, addressing the idealistic and often condescending pacifism of liberals. I know to these sorts of people, liberals and anarchists and Marxist and what have you are all basically the same thing, but to those of us who actually bother to do a bit of rudimentary research, they aren't. Given all these points, generally I advise people not to engage these kinds of channel. See them as specimens to be studied by all means, but don't be so naive as to think these people are worth attempting some sort of meaningful dialogue with. When you indulge these sorts of people with debates or Google Hangouts or whatever else, you essentially feed their ego, engorging their ill-deserved sense of self-importance. However, a couple of claims have been made, in particular an accusation that needs to be addressed. One, that so far the battle between fascists and anti-fascists has been fought entirely with words, and therefore I am wrong when I say this is not a battle that can be won with only words.
See, it kinda sounds like he's suggesting that violence is necessary, even if the battle so far has been a battle of words.
Two, that I think everyone who disagrees with me is a fascist, and I am therefore advocating violence against people, not in self-defence against brutality and oppression, but rather as an act purely provoked by intellectual disagreement. Let's look at that first claim.
The battle so far has been a battle of words.
Were these members of the KKK who stabbed people back in February just using words? What about this man who shot a black teenager the other week? Was he just using words? What about those Trump supporters who beat up and urinated upon an elderly Mexican man? Were they just using words? Is that your argument? That people just haven't used the right words? Just haven't used enough words? Further, do you think any of these people could have been stopped with words? Do you seriously think every incident of violence throughout history could have been avoided if only people had used the right words? Do you think Hitler could have been stopped with words? Mussolini? At the time, there were people who believed so. As Trotsky put it, the proletariat, even after the September catastrophe, was capable of waging defensive battles, but the social democracy was concerned with only one thing: to withdraw the workers from combat at the cost of one concession after another. The social democracy hoped that the docile conduct of the workers would restore the public opinion of the bourgeoisie against the fascists. Moreover, the reformists even banked strongly upon the help of King Victor Emmanuel. To the last hour they restrained the workers with might and main from giving battle to Mussolini's bands. It availed them nothing. The crown, along with the upper crust of the bourgeoisie, swung over to the side of fascism. Convinced at the last moment that fascism was not to be checked by obedience, the Social Democrats issued a call to the workers for a general strike. But their proclamation suffered a fiasco. The reformists had dampened the powder so long in their fear lest it should explode that when they finally, with a trembling hand, did apply a burning fuse to it, the powder did not catch. Is it really so extreme to put such people into a category entitled fascists who can't be convinced? Are you really so damn ignorant of the world around you that you have only ever noticed fascists using words and not those who shoot people and stab people and beat people and piss on people? Let's look at that second claim. Do you seriously think my issue with the aforementioned people is nothing more than disagreement? Is the fact I think James Means was a human being with his whole life ahead of him and William Pullman thinks he was another piece of trash simply a fucking disagreement? Do you seriously think using violence against such people amounts to fascism? There are differing definitions of fascism, but seeing as Trotsky was a Marxist and seeing as I chose to quote Trotsky, it seems appropriate to refer to how Marxists define fascism. The Encyclopedia of Marxism describes fascism as right-wing, fiercely nationalist, subjectivist in philosophy, and totalitarian in practice. It is an extreme reactionary form of capitalist government. They also list 9 fundamental characteristics of fascism. All are interesting, but of particular relevance here is number 3. Hierarchy. Fascist society is ruled by a righteous leader who is supported by an elite secret vanguard of capitalists. Hierarchy is prevalent throughout all aspects of society. Every street, every workplace, every school will have its local Hitler, part police informer, part bureaucrat, and society is prepared for war at all times. The absolute power of the social hierarchy prevails over everything, and thus a totalitarian society is formed. Representative government is acceptable only if it can be controlled and regulated. Direct democracy, e.g. communism, is the greatest of all crimes. Any who oppose the social hierarchy of fascism will be imprisoned or executed. Does that sound like a description of people who can be fought using words to you? If you couldn't convince such people to not imprison or execute you, would you seriously just shrug your shoulders? I'll tell you what it does sound like. A very apt description of the sort of society the people mentioned earlier would envision. It's also an apt description of the ideology of this commenter mentioned earlier who wanted to exterminate all Marxists. So people who think my definition of a fascist is someone who disagrees with me, I'd like you to provide some evidence, please. Not just general impressions you get, which are rather worthless, but rather some solid evidence. Further, people who think fascists, as defined by myself and by the Encyclopedia of Marxism, are people who can be fought just using words, I'd like you to explain exactly how. Regarding this,
I think recent political events have revealed to us that people are sick and tired of being labelled bigoted, sexist, racist, homophobic and xenophobic for having the audacity of holding a different opinion. It's funny how you can put people off by painting them as a monster, isn't it?
I first must note the complete hypocrisy of a subculture who lives by mantras such as words can never hurt you, and offence can't be given, it can only be taken, and fuck your feelings, getting as obviously offended as they are by words such as racist, sexist, homophobe, etc. Further, I'm somewhat confused as to how voting in Donald Trump has or will in any way bring about an end to these accusations. Is Donald Trump going to ban people from accusing other people of being racist, homophobic, sexist, etc.? Or are people who accuse other people of being racist, homophobic, sexist, etc. just going to willingly stop? If anything, it seems such people are more fired up than ever following the election. I think it's safe to say we're going to hit a great deal of noise from these sorts of people over the next 4 years, not less. From what I can see, it seems people who were sick of being called racist, homophobic, sexist, etc. Rather than stopping being racist, homophobic, sexist, etc., or just, getting the fuck over being called racist, sexist, homophobic, etc., they decided to vote for a candidate who wants to take away women's right to abortion, dehumanise immigrants, abolish gay marriage, etc., out of pure, unadulterated spite. It's one thing to complain about political correctness in entertainment, but Donald Trump is not an entertainer, he's a politician. As President of the United States, he will be required to forge and maintain good relations with other countries. If he ends up offending the leader of another country with racial or xenophobic slurs, that can and will have very real international consequences. It isn't like offending someone on YouTube or Twitter or whatever social media site. We're talking about people with the power to make serious decisions here. As such, if you support Donald Trump because you don't like political correctness, then you are a fucking fool. To add insult to injury, Trump doesn't believe in climate change and plans to turn over environmental regulation on industry, which will see huge amounts of carbon pumped into the atmosphere, right when we are at a particularly crucial tipping point in the battle against climate change. America is the most powerful nation on Earth, as such they really do need to be on board with fighting climate change. Just how petty-minded and spiteful do you have to be willing to essentially destroy the planet just because you're butthurt over being called a racist or a homophobe or a sexist or such similar? Further, as devout free speech warriors, how do Baring and Company rationalise their support of someone who openly threatens to use state power to intimidate the free press?
We're going to open up those libel laws so that when the New York Times writes a hit piece, which is a total disgrace, or when the Washington Post, which is there for other reasons, writes a hit piece, we can sue them and win money instead of having no chance of winning because they're totally protected. You see, with me, they're not protected because I'm not like other people, but I'm not taking money. I'm not taking their money. So we're going to open up those libel laws, folks, and we're going to have people sue you like you never got sued before.
I cannot stress enough that this is a very real free speech issue, not wah wah wah, Steve Shives blocked me on Twitter, but a very real threat of legal consequences for people who express disagreement with the government. Lord alone knows what depths of bizarre pedantry Baring and Company are going to plunge to in order to rationalise their way out of that. Thank you for watching. Here is a summary of the points I'd like people to address, and remember, if you disagree with me, I will violently murder you. Goodbye.